and a longtime friend of mine, so these are things we've talked about a long time, and I'm glad to talk to you here.
It's my pleasure, as always.
Start with that title, Republic of Imagination. What does it mean? What does it mean to you?
Well, being in Miami Book Fair, I feel that I have a ready-made answer for you. That you know what is happening outside this studio is sort of a representative of what Republic of Imagination is. There are mainly strangers walking around as if they have been long-time friends, you know, and what brings them all together, this community of readers and authors and book lovers, is books, you know, and these books transcend the limitations of time and geography and nationality and all the things that the outside world is fighting over here is looked at through the alternative eyes of something much more enduring, which is imagination.
I know that for you, this was in part a kind of follow-up to your earlier book, Reading Lolita in Tehran, because one of the big issues in this book is comparing societies, but looking at how that community works in a democracy like ours, right?
Yes.
But it starts in Iran, where things are quite different.
It starts in Iran, where things are quite different, and I mentioned a lot of writers and poets from Eastern Europe as well, to which Iranians feel very close to, in fact. And that is why you feel that dictatorships and totalitarian societies sometimes become distorted mirrors of the democracies, showing it at a democracy at its best and its worst. And the whole idea is that where I come from, the lines are drawn already. Books are important and essential because they're dangerous to the rulers. And that is why they're beloved by the people. And
that gives them a kind of importance because they're dangerous. And it gives writers a kind of importance.
I mean, you know, the first people that were targeted by the Islamic Republic were women, minorities, and culture. And humanities in the academia were the first victims of the regime. And writers and poets were the ones who went to jail. Not because they were political, but because they're just subversive by nature. They say the truth. And truth is not savory to many people.
So the question is, what happens in a society like ours where you don't have the immediacy of the danger, right? A book gets put out, and we're surrounded by thousands of books, right? And authors. And no one of them is dangerous in the sense that you're talking about in Iran or Eastern Europe.
Of course. They're dangerous enough to be banned and censored.
In some cases.
And some of them, like Huckleberry Finn, are banned since the day of their birth to the present. And I ask the people who keep telling us that books are irrelevant to our lives, why do you ban them if they're irrelevant? You know, if there's something about them that is not dangerous to you. But also in this country, I think things are far more subtle, that we're a lot of times seduced into not thinking, because books, you know, Baldwin used to say that art would not be important if life was not important, and life is important. Books are about the complications, contradictions, paradoxes, questions about living, about life, about ordinary human beings like myself, you know, and so people, since the dawn of time, have been telling stories in order to discover who they are and what the world is. So it's not something that you don't need in a democracy because you have better technology. You take the technology and you tell a story.
Well, I mean, in Reading Lolita, you were looking at American literature and other literature, but American literature through the eyes of an Iranian. Here, you're looking at American literature as someone who's lived here for a long time, looking at our culture. And so, but the theme, and you pick a few key books and characters. What themes jump out at you in the end of American literature as relevant to our culture today?
Well, first of all, there's a lot of talk about patriotism in this country, at least from some quarters. And I feel that, especially with the book that I chose to begin with, which is Mark Twain's Huckleberry Finn, that it actually goes to the heart of the idea of America and American individualism. What does it mean when we talk about individualism? Does it mean greed, everyone for his own, you know, dog eat dog? Or does it mean, as Huck Finn proves to us, as a sort of moral growth, and the fact that an individual does not grow unless he is seen through the eyes of the others, and he doesn't grow if he doesn't connect and if he doesn't give up himself, the way Huck and Jim give to one another constantly and are resurrected through one another's eyes. And the fact that materialism in these books is almost shunned. These people choose to be outcasts and outsiders and look for horizons, you know, and it is something that our conformist society constantly builds barriers against.
Because even though you see this community of the Republic of the Imagination here in Miami and in many walks of life and among book readers, part of what you're writing about is concerns about how that plays out or doesn't play out in the rest of our culture.
Yes,
right?
Because how could you have a democratic society without individuals who have the power to make a choice? Because the first thing about individual liberty is individual responsibility.
Right.
And individual responsibility comes through knowledge. And knowledge comes through many ways, and one way is the imaginative knowledge. You need to have a sense of where you come from, which is from history, and where you come from in terms of the heart, morality, your duty and civic responsibility. And all of that comes from books.
Right.
You know,
but I mean, this is something we've talked about for many years, is the role of the humanities.
Yes.
And in an era where, you know, it's expensive to go to college, for example, where there's a lot of pressure on young people to get the kind of degrees that get them jobs, and you can understand a lot of that. How do we maintain that love of books or history or philosophy or literature that contributes to this kind of republic of imagination you want?
You know, a society that thinks being a teacher, a philosopher, a writer, a poet, a librarian, a museum curator, a musician is not job or vocation, is a society deeply in trouble. You know, we constantly, I recently read Mr. Jeb Bush, again referring to China, how the Chinese students, you know, are so great in math, yada, yada. But what he didn't mention was that China has now realized that you can't just use science and technology without humanities, without liberal arts. That's why they're coming to America to learn from us, and they cannot have liberal arts if they don't have liberty. So the idea of liberal arts and liberty are very closely interconnected. And a democratic society that is based on multivocality of voices, on the choice of the individual, cannot live without the mechanisms which humanities gives you to think and to imagine and to connect.
I know you're on your book tour now, right? And so you're having these discussions all over the country.
Yes.
It resonates with, I suppose it resonates with people who come to hear you. They appreciate it, and they're sort of thirsting in a sense, right, for that.
They are. You know, Jeff, honestly, what I see from our elite, both in the beloved city that I live in, which is Washington, D.C., the dismissal of humanities and of us that is based on an arrogance which comes out of ignorance. And what I see of the people who come to a place like this, or who come to, you know, whom I meet during my book tour, quote unquote, ordinary Americans, but there is so much demand for a meaningful life. They're not saying we want to starve and not have a vocation, but they are saying that a democratic society should provide every citizen with what that citizen needs to be fulfilled. And to direct them towards rigidity is something that they disagree with. So I think we can build communities from bottom up that will defend the heritage, the cultural heritage of this country, as well as other aspects.
All right, building or rebuilding the Republic of Imagination. Azar Nafisi, thanks so much.
Thank you very much, Jeff Brown.